Going, but good afternoon and thank you for staying late. My name is Matt Smith and I am the Chief Evangelist for Anvato. We are a turnkey TV Everywhere platform that enables broadcasters and operators to get their content to any screen. We're here to talk about the future of multi-platform TV and digital hybrid programming. I promise I'll explain that as we go along. So, once upon a screen, let's go back a bit before we talk about the future. And think about how we used to watch television. So it wasn't that many years ago that we were gathered around a set like this. Note there's no DVR, there's certainly no Apple TV. But we were one group that watched content in one room. We were a very addressable audience, and there are a very limited number of channels. And we'll get to that in just a second. Rewind a few more years, or fast forward a few years. And here we are in a living room where we've got multiple screens at play, right? Maybe a tablet, a smartphone, and likely from the camera's vantage point, we're looking at a unit that's hanging on a wall. Now here's the guy who's disrupting everything in my mind today, right? This is the Generation Z kid. Darn you, Generation Z kid. I'll tell you why in a second. Let's take a look at him. This is the new normal. The Generation Z viewer is the most disruptive element in our world today. He is not likely to watch the default largest screen. Let me say that again. This kid will never default to the 65-inch screen. They want to watch content in their hand, on their lap, where they are, wherever they are, and the pipe here is either that Wi-Fi network in the home or their LTE signal. But they're very disruptive. He may never watch a sports highlight. So whether it's a football match or the three-point winning shot in a basketball game, this young man will never watch the sports highlight program, whether it's Sports Center or whatever the sports show du jour here in Europe is. Why would he do that when he can watch this content directly in his Twitter feed? Twitter or Facebook gets him everything he needs. So the new challenge is to distribute content through those channels. This viewer, again, make no mistake about it, consumes content in new disruptive fashions. This is I won't call it the most important, but this is one of the most important viewers that we have to program for today. So let's take a look at some of these radical shifts in viewings. Again, this antiquated 70s looking happy living room. Let's talk about what we did back then. Again, we were all in one room, generally. We had a very finite number of channels. Some in the room can probably remember the days when we only had 3 or 4 network channels that had 3 letters in the alphabet behind them. Very addressable audience, so that meant that the adverts reached a very high audience and drove very high CPMs. So we saw very expensive adverts being paid to a concentrated audience because we had a very small environment in which we viewed this content. And there was a limited number of ad networks and exchanges. So today, with this Generation Z viewer and even Generation X and Y, viewers are everywhere on every screen, or any screen. There are an exploding number of channels, and this is compounded by the fact that MCNs are coming to play these days, places like Maker Studios and Fullscreen. They're a very highly mobile audience, and the CPMs will vary greatly by content type. You've heard it before, and that idea will still persist that it's a hits-driven world, and the most popular and the best prepared content will be watched the most. But again, we're in a universe where Vine clips are viral and very social, and of course YouTube clips are as well. And lastly, there's many ad networks and exchanges. So there's a lot of ways to monetize this content. So the challenge for programmers, broadcasters, aggregators, technologists, we have to reach the viewer on the screen of their choosing, where they want to watch the content, when they want to watch it. Again, remember, deliver that content in the most compelling, engaging manner with the highest quality. I call this better than broadcast. To simply stream a channel through to a screen is not good enough today. There have to be elements in and around that interactive experience because it's very touch sensitive to make this content make more sense to the viewer. Monetize the content and derive the highest CPM possible. Not, again, just putting a live linear signal up on a screen or in a tablet or a smartphone and assuming that, or not monetizing it first and foremost is almost a sin these days. But think of how you can create immersive interactive experiences for that viewer and at a minimum, table stakes, be willing to think about monetizing that content and inserting ads in that stream. And then I'll touch on this in a second. Deliver an ad that's relevant to the user. So think of this not in terms of one ad reaching hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands, but one ad reaching a handful of users, or even one ad reaching one user. And lastly, simplify the technology stack. It wasn't that long ago that, from an architecture perspective, I was having to answer questions for people so that we could figure out how to reach a matrix of Nokia N-series phones, or and then add the Windows phones in there. And then this is all pre-Android and pre-iOS, but it's gone from being a very complex world of mobile, where it was almost impossible to reach even 60% of the screens, down to one where we can reach almost every screen. So, and this gets into something that we think makes a lot of sense. Play one format everywhere. The TV Everywhere experience today is one where we can reach every screen with one format. It was, again, just a couple of years ago, we were trying to figure out where would we play Flash? What browser on what operating system would work? Do I do Flash on Firefox on PC? Okay, what about the Mac? And then what about these Xbox devices and Roku? How do I get there? Well, today, through no fault of anyone's, the technology stack is flattened out, and we have the Apple HLS spec, which stands for HTTP Live Streaming, that will get you to any device that is connected that can render video. So if we have a smart TV and you've got a Netflix icon or a Roku icon, chances are that TV will play garden variety HLS, which is also played natively on your iOS devices and your Android devices from version 4 forward in the Android case. So again, the old way of doing things with disjointed technology stacks, disconnected advertising strategies has gone by the wayside and kind of gone in the dustbin, so to say, to where we can play HLS on every screen. So back to that challenge. So we're all watching ITV here in London, and this is where things get really exciting. Instead of thinking about one ad reaching the entire audience, we all have these devices in our pockets. They're all connected to the cloud. Therefore, we know where you are in a good way in a given minute. So if you're watching ITV, whether it's an ad break that happens or whether it's simply a graphic that slides up into the frame, we can deliver you, on the east side of London, a specific ad to say, save $5 on your next pair of Adidas shoes at so-and-so sporting goods store. Whereas on the west side of town, we can deliver you a Costa Coffee coupon to save $1 off your next coffee. And guess what? The coffee store is literally 75 yards around the corner from you. We know where you are, so we can deliver ads that are more relevant to you in real time. That results in an experience that is not only beneficial for the consumer/viewer, but also for the advertiser, right? Think of this not in the ways that the web was creepy just 2 or 3 years ago, where if you were shopping for a set of tires, you saw nothing but banner ads for tires for the next week. This is more relevant in terms of delivering the right ad to you as a user, as a consumer, and as a viewer of the content. How does it work? So apologies, if any of you were at the Royal College of Surgeons in London a couple of weeks ago and heard some of this talk, you know that I'm not that Matt Smith from Doctor Who, nor am I knighted. But in any event, this is a little bit of technical detail about how ad insertion works. So in that ad pod, in the broadcast signal, I should say, there are markers that are fairly common regardless of geography. We call them SCTE or SCTE markers, whether it's digital or baseband. We have 35 and 104. We also have GPI triggers, so if you don't have these marks in the broadcast, there are other electronic means through which we can signal from a switcher to the video equipment the presence of an ad break beginning and ending. And last but not least, the HTTP connection, we can talk to some of these automation playout systems. But the SCTE messaging is still the most robust and complete. It's the one that we prefer, and works with the HLS spec the best too. And the OTT outputs are leveraging the ability of HLS to splice streams. So we can gracefully, in a frame-accurate way, go from content or program into an advert and into an ad pod. And deliver ads in, again, relevant to you, the viewer, but also in some cases, depending on the broadcaster, allow some of those national ads to play through, because frankly, that's the way those deals are being negotiated, and they want that revenue to be passed through. And then maybe at the tail end of the break, you've got more regional ads relevant to a group of users, or as I mentioned a second ago, individual users. And the HLS specification, which is also called the Panto spec, calls for these discontinuity tags, which allow us to switch back and forth between these streams. So the framework is there, and this is a diagram to show you how it works. And again, your video signal in the top left, coming in from a variety of sources into a live stream appliance, which is talking to the broadcast automation systems, and we're handing the CDN a manifest and the stream chunks. And the ad network here, again, is we're fairly agnostic, and we can take that information from the ad network, make the splices we've talked about, and deliver an ad relevant to the user or to a group of users. Technology gotchas. There are some. Here are the potholes. So as I mentioned before, multiple streaming protocols and formats can greatly increase the complexity and reduce your ability to deliver ads at scale. That is a key takeaway. Also, making assumptions that any flavor of RTMP stream can work and be spliced gracefully and deliver ads everywhere. Actual mileage can and does vary. And HLS, we've arrived at this specification where we are able to deliver to a variety of devices, but there are subtle nuances about how some of us technologists have interpreted the spec, and again, actual mileage may vary. One size does not fit all, although we're getting close. Client-side ad calls and rendering. I'm jokingly saying here that this is not your grandfather's ad replacement, but it wasn't that long ago that we were doing ad calls at the client on the PC or the laptop, the Mac. That introduced latency. It basically looked like a bad cable TV experience where you could see the end of one ad and the beginning of another. The most graceful, most robust approaches today call for doing this stitch in the cloud. And again, the beauty of that is that we have an individual connection with the user so that we can target ads more effectively. And then last but not least, not all platforms play fairly. The Xbox One, the Xbox 360, smart TVs. Again, like I said, make the assumption that if you see a smart TV with a Roku or a Netflix icon there, that it'll play HLS. But specifically to the Xbox platform, the Xbox One will natively do HLS, so it means you can reach that platform very easily from a development perspective. The 360 was not a Windows OS. I didn't know that until recently, but then again, I'd never opened my Xbox One box up. But it is a proprietary OS, but plugins can be built. You can still deliver HLS to that platform. So think of the new frontier, though. You're like, wait a second, Matt, you just talked about that. Well, these more traditional platforms, I think we've learned how to get to, and we know how to monetize, and we know how to reach the audiences there. But there are two massive networks that are becoming more and more prevalent to my customers, to you, to your customers, and that is Facebook and Twitter. Let's say a year ago, a strategy for a broadcaster trying to reach their audience on Facebook and Twitter might have included a link from their feed back to their website. I wouldn't have doubted it 3 years ago. It seemed like a decent strategy. But the reach of these audiences, the number of people who are there to watch that content is staggering. So you want to reach them in that feed in real time. Think back to the example I made just a few minutes ago about the Generation Z kid, 14 years old. He gets his sports highlights from Twitter and Facebook. Well, so does his mom, and so does his grandmother, and so does his grandfather. That audience is massive. So when you think about delivering your content to any screen anywhere, definitely have to think of these audiences. So we'll get to the notion of clipping that content in real time. So whether it's a three-point shot that wins the basketball game, a winning goal in a football match, or a car chase, the goal for a lot of those who create this content and curate it is to get it out as fast as they can in real time. So getting the clip of the car chase out 3 hours after the car chase ended results in a huge audience loss. Key takeaway there. So social syndication is the new table stakes, right? Live sports and news, generally that's something we can't stop. We can't pause. Sure, we can record the football match, but it is the most perishable content we have, and it's the most valuable to broadcast brands. Again, it's a much larger audience than your brand. Even if you're the BBC, even if you're Channel 4, your Facebook and your Twitter feeds of those brands are larger than your .com. Again, inline viewing, no links out. So leverage the APIs that these organizations have created for you. Facebook has a brand new video API. We are an early participant in that. And Twitter has Twit cards. Use them. Put your clips and your brand in your viewers' feeds, on your feeds, and in theirs, because there are other things that are going to come after this where you'll benefit from additional audience because they'll share it. They'll enable you to tag things in there. They're going to drive traffic even more. And then last but not least, monetization strategies will be developing. You've got to build audience first, and then we can monetize it. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing, and yes, it involves putting trust in Twitter and Facebook, but we think and we feel confident that they're going to have good strategies here. I mentioned the Facebook video API. It's brand new. It's about 3 months old. Again, the idea there is think about NBC, for example, and The Tonight Show. So in the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon Facebook and Twitter feeds, if they'll allow the content creator to tag things in the video window. So let's say Tom Hanks is on Jimmy Fallon's show. We tag Tom Hanks. All of you who follow Tom Hanks in your social networks will now see that video in your feed, right? Audience just multiplied by orders of magnitude. Therefore, so did the CPMs went up too. So it's all going to be this self-feeding and self-fulfilling ecosystem. So last but not least, what we think comprises a complete end-to-end TV everywhere platform. Signal acquisition, beginning in the broadcast facility or in the head end, using both on-premise and software to create the renditions that we've talked about, capturing that content in the cloud and making it available anywhere on any screen, syndication to not only the destinations we've talked about, but taking that content out to Yahoo, AOL, YouTube, Time Warner Cable, Sky. You get the idea that it's more about getting your content out in front of as many eyes as you can than it is just associating it right there with your brand. Live ad insertion. Can't say how critical I think this is. We're seeing dramatic increases in the monetization opportunities in North America. I believe that if they're not already here in Europe, we're going to follow suit very quickly. Building these businesses of entitlement subscriptions, whether you're doing it through something like Adobe Pass, the Akamai identity service, authenticating against a cable or satellite subscription so that people can watch your content, or building a direct relationship with them. We're seeing more and more of this, right? HBO kind of started they opened the floodgates. Play out again, our 2 cents in the world, meaning that one format can play across every screen. That is the case today. Measuring and monitoring your content, knowing how it's performing, where it is, how people are interacting with it. And again, social networks have to be a third leg, if not a second and a half leg of your strategy. So that is it. I think I have about a minute for questions, if anyone has any in the audience. Over here.
Are there any options for blocking content from certain users or user groups?
Any options for blocking content from certain users or user groups? Can I extrapolate there? Does that mean geofencing and enforcing rights in different geographies?
For example.
Absolutely. So great question. So let's make the assumption that the Masters was like a 12-hour-long event, right? Great golf match. I get on a plane in Dallas, and I'm watching Jordan Spieth, and he's on the 14th hole, and I had to get on the plane. And I get off the plane here in London, and again, pretend the Masters is still going on, but I get off the plane, and I'm watching it on like NBC's Golf Channel app, and it pops up and says, sorry, Mr. Viewer, I'm not authorized to let you view this in this region. Stop, no more playing. That's one scenario. Two could be, Mr. Viewer, you're out of the geography you just traveled from. I can give you yesterday's match as an on-demand asset. So I could spin that up and play it as live. You can just plain black it out. You could even spin up an episode of Miami Vice, right? So there's a variety of business logic that comes into play, and platforms like ours are configured today to enforce that. But those rules are becoming more and more important because not everybody has the rights to stream content all the time. In fact, I heard a story about a week and a half ago where on the new Sling TV service, one of the channels, I think it was Lifetime, from 4 to 5 Eastern, didn't have the rights to stream Law and Order. So they just had black up for an hour. Obviously, I'm sure they've changed that and since put up a slate or something, but you get the idea that you have to think of this, from a programming perspective too. It's okay, I think, to tell the viewer, I don't have the rights to allow you to do this. However, give them another option, right? That makes sense. Either a slate that explains why or another piece of content maybe to appease the viewer. Anyone else? Well, thank you for your time. Hope it's been helpful information, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today.